Rolex is a world-famous luxury watch brand. According to Forbes, the company Rolex is worth $9.5 billion and has done $5.2 billion in sales in 2020. The opulent watch company was founded in London in the year 1905 by Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis, but was called Wilsdorf and Davis back then. They later decided on the famous and genius name Rolex. In this video, we will be looking at some facts you might not have known about Rolex. We will be looking at how Rolex came to be and learn some of the struggles the company went through to become a huge success. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video from us. Number 1. The start of Rolex. The history of Rolex is linked to the visionary spirit of its founder, Hans Wilsdorf. In 1905, at the age of 24, Hans Wilsdorf founded a company specializing in the distribution of timepieces. To many people's surprise, Rolex was not founded in Geneva, but actually in London. He began to dream of a watch worn on the wrist. Wristwatches were not very precise at the time, but Hans Wilsdorf foresaw that they could become not only elegant, but also reliable. To convince the public of the reliability of his innovative timepieces, he equipped them with small, very precise movements manufactured by a Swiss watchmaking company in Bienne. Number 2. The name Rolex. The name Rolex doesn't actually mean anything. Hans Wilsdorf wanted a name that was short, easy to say and remember in any language, and a name which looked good on watch movements and dials. He decided it should be 5 letters and tried combining all the letters of the alphabet in every possible way. This gave him 100 names or so, but said none of them felt right. He then quoted, "One morning, while riding on the upper deck of a horse-drawn omnibus along Cheapside in the city of London, a genie whispered, 'Rolex,' in my ear." That is how they got the short and easy to remember 5-letter name. Number 3. It takes 1 year to make one Rolex watch. The main reason why Rolexes are so expensive is because of the time it takes to make one. Despite rolling out hundreds of thousands of watches every year, each watch is handmade by the best crafters in the world. Each individual watch is vigorously tested to ensure the highest quality possible is achieved in every watch. The company still uses robots and machines, however, they use it for tasks that humans aren't as good at. These include things like sorting and filing. Most of the machines that they use are still human operated. This tradition still remains to this day, and is probably one of the reasons why the brand stood the test of time and still remains relevant to this day. Number 4. Rolex has its own science lab. Given how much Rolex has done over the years, it is obvious that they have a research and development department. However, Rolex takes things to the next level by having multiple and different professional science labs. The reason they have these labs is to test new manufacturing techniques and new things they may be able to add to the luxury watches. The watch company has chemistry labs where they test out new oils and lubricants that they use for the machinery. They even use electron microscopes to scrutinize different metals and materials so they can use it in the manufacturing process of their timeless timepieces. Number 5. They make their own gold. One thing you may not know about Rolex is that they have an in-house factory that makes their own gold. Rolex is a company that is obsessed with quality and organization, so they decided the best way to ensure quality metals is by making it themselves. They still have a handful of suppliers to make them steel, but they make their own gold and platinum. Large kilns are used to melt and mix the metals that they turn into bracelets and cases. Because Rolex makes their own gold, they can ensure absolute quality and can manufacture the best looking parts for the exuberant brand. One reason for the expensive price tag Rolex can ask for is because of the quality it guarantees from the start of the pipeline to the finish. Number 6. They moved from London to Geneva to cut taxes. Rolex first started out in London. Hans Wilsdorf and his brother-in-law used to import the individual pieces and assemble the watches themselves. A few years later, they decided to make the pieces themselves. Because of World War I, the company had to pay a lot of money in import taxes and decided to relocate to Switzerland. They decided to move to Switzerland because there was a lot of skilled watchmakers there and because Switzerland is known as a tax haven. Number 7. The first ever waterproof wristwatch was built by Rolex. These days, waterproof watches and phones are very common. Having a watch be waterproof is pretty much a necessity in the modern day world, but it was very different 100 years ago as they didn't have the technology to make waterproof gadgets. Rolex solved this problem in 1926 when it made the first ever waterproof wristwatch. The Rolex Oyster is the first ever waterproof and dustproof watch to ever be made. The name Oyster is still used today for some of its watches. Number 8. How to spot a fake Rolex. On social media platforms like YouTube, the most viewed content are those where people flex their expensive cars, houses, and watches. There are fake Rolexes, but aren't as common as other brands because it is very difficult to replicate a Rolex. It is difficult to even buy Rolexes for under $1,000, which shows how expensive they are. The easiest way to spot a fake Rolex is by looking at the seconds hand. The seconds hand will stutter, whereas a real Rolex has a smooth seconds hand movement. A real Rolex doesn't have a ticking sound and is the biggest giveaway of a fake Rolex. The second way to spot a fake Rolex is that they are much lighter. Rolex uses premium high-quality materials and weighs more than a cheap regular watch. Thirdly, the Cyclops lens on the face of the Rolex will magnify the date. Most fake Rolexes skip this part so the date will appear the same size. If the date isn't magnified, it means the Rolex isn't genuine. Number 9. Rolex is actually a charity. One uncommon fact about Rolex is that it's a charity. Rolex is owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, which was set up after the death of Hans Wilsdorf's wife in 1944. All the ownership shares have been transferred to the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation along with clear instruction on how to handle the finances for the company. In Switzerland, private-owned charities do not need to disclose their charitable donations. This means you can't see what contributions Rolex actually have made. Since Rolex is technically owned by a charity, it gets major tax benefits and reliefs. Number 10. Rolex has over 60% profit margins on all of their watches. Profit margins on luxury watch brands vary from 25% to 40%. However, Rolex smashes these averages and has a whopping 60% profit margin on every single watch they sell. Because Rolex is a vertically integrated company, they dictate the price of how much it costs to acquire the precious metals. This lets them make the watches for considerably less than the actual sell price. The reason why it still costs so much is because the consumer is paying for innovation, heritage, and the time of some of the most skilled watchmakers in the world. These are some of the reasons why people are willing to pay so much for a Rolex watch. There you have it. These are 10 facts you may not have known about Rolex. Would you ever buy a Rolex, or do you already own one? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe and turn on those post notifications. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.